Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel Made by Margaret. My name is Emma Margaret and this is the very first knitting podcast episode. In my previous video, I talked about my knitting goals for 2025 in a Make 9 style format where I talked about the 9 pieces I'm hoping to knit this year. And this video is going to follow your pretty standard video knitting podcast format where I talk about my finished objects, my works in progress or WIPs, as well as any new yarn acquisitions I have. It's been in about 4.5 or 5 weeks since that last video, and I do have some things to share with you guys, so I'm very excited to do that. Before we jump into it, I wanted to talk about the first piece we'll be discussing, which is what I'm wearing. This is the Magnolia Bloom sweater by Camille Vade. I finished this in I think late summer, early fall of 2023. So I've had this garment for about 1.5 years now and it has got some pretty decent use out of it. I have a couple of notes about the sweater in my notebook here. So if you see me referring to that, it's just to make sure that I get all of the information correct for you guys. So I knit this in the size large. I don't have the finished measurements for the piece. However, I am pretty sure that I was able to hit gauge, and I'll talk about that in a second. It was knit in 1 strand of Drops Nepal in the color Denim Blue, held together with 1 strand of Drops Kid Silk in the color Storm Blue. And together, I think that's meant to give a worsted weight yarn. Now, the pattern calls for 6mm needles for the collar and for the cuff, and 7mm needles for the rest of the body. However, I didn't hit gauge with that. I ended up having to go up 1mm in both of the needle sizes. So I knit this in an 8mm needle for most of the body, and then a 7mm needle for the collar and for the cuff, just for anyone's reference. My gauge does tend to be a little bit tight. It's pretty common that I would up my needle size by at least 1 US size needle for most patterns. So that's definitely a me problem and not an issue with the pattern itself. The pattern was great. If you're looking to knit a sweater and you like this one and you haven't had a sweater before or you're a beginner knitter, I would really highly recommend it. I think it's fantastic. It teaches you a lot of new techniques in a very accessible format, and because the gauge of it is quite large, it flies by really quickly. So just a little bit about the construction. It is a top-down raglan sweater. So you start knitting the collar and then you fold it over on the inside and you bind your live edge to that cast on edge and then continue knitting down in a lace yoke raglan. It includes these fun little baubles, which I think look really pretty, but I absolutely hated making. I'm really torn between whether I love or hate baubles. The jury's still out. It does have some short row shaping along the back of the sweater below the yoke before you divide for the arms and the body. And if you're not familiar with short row shaping, this basically just helps the fit of the sweater a little bit. I particularly like when sweaters have it included. And then from the bottom of the lace yoke on the arms and the body, you're just knitting all the way down in regular stockinette stitch until you hit the hem as well as the cuff, where the pattern recommends that you do 1x1 ribbing. And this is where we'll talk about the modification that I made to this pattern. I don't know if this is a hot topic or not, but I hate 1x1 ribbing. It never looks good. Mine always looks really wonky. It's never as polished as I want it to be. It looks homemade in kind of the worst sense of the word, and I just don't particularly like it. So whenever patterns call for 1x1 ribbing, and sorry, 1x1 ribbing for people who don't know is when you knit 1 stitch, purl 1 stitch, knit 1 stitch, purl 1 stitch, and then you repeat that around for the entire row. So that's 1x1 ribbing. And I always do half twisted rib, where I twist that knit stitch, regular purl, twist the knit stitch, regular purl, and continue all the way around. And on the right side of the row, what that ends up doing is that knit stitch looks a lot tighter and a lot more polished. I'll use the collar, or the cuff, of my sweater as an illustration of that, but if you're interested, please just watch other YouTube videos or YouTube tutorials. I'm sure that they'll explain it much better. So this is the right side, and you can see it's 1 twisted knit, one purl, one twisted knit, one purl as you go along. And the knit stitches, they look quite tight and quite clean. It might be a little bit twisted because I'm showing my arm a little bit awkwardly here, but it's really nice. I really like the effect of that. If I flip this collar now inside out, the purl stitches will be twisted and the knit stitches will be regular. And I hope you can see here how the knit stitches are just a little bit more open and a little more irregular than how they look on the actual outside of the sweater. And this small change makes a huge difference to me, this half twisted rib. If you do a full twisted rib, it can mean your work starts to slant quite significantly because you're twisting all of those stitches. So I always alternate for a half twisted rib, and I've never had any problems with any slanting. Sometimes it will slant a little bit, but I am personally much less bothered by minimal slanting than I am from kind of those open looking knit stitches. And so that's kind of my hot take for this video, if you will, is that I do not like 1x1 ribbing, and I always go for a half twisted rib instead. And you'll see that in the finished object that I have as well. One thing I wanted to note for this sweater, I don't really have anything to compare it to because, again, this is the only sweater I've ever made. I do find that it pills. So one strand of Drops Nepal, which is a merino alpaca blend, with one strand of their silk mohair. And I do find that it pills. I get a lot of wear out of this sweater, so I don't know if it's pilling an appropriate amount for these materials or if it's pilling more than any other brands, merino, alpaca, kid silk would, but it does pill, particularly along, you know, the underside of the arms. And I get a lot of pilling across my low back, which is really weird, but I think it's because that's where my backpack hits and it creates a lot of rubbing and a lot of friction. I don't know if anyone else has that problem or a reasonable explanation why I'm getting a bunch of pilling along my low back, but that's what I've been experiencing. I don't have one of those shavers. I don't use a razor. I just very lightly pick up the pill and then snip beneath it with a pair of scissors in order to not defluff the sweater, but to remove those pill and forget it from getting larger and a sort of mat of appearance on the top of the fabric, which is what I don't want. Yeah, so that's what I'm wearing. That's enough about the Magnolia Bloom sweater. We can move next into my finished object. And this is the Stockholm Slipover by Petite Knit. I finished it. I love it. I've not worn it yet, but I am very excited to wear it. And you probably saw this if you watched my last video. I had already cast it on. I had done, I believe, the back panel and 1.5 of the front panels, but had not joined in for the body yet. And now it is done. I'm very, very happy with it. It feels very soft. It feels very cozy. Really, really pleased with how this sweater has come out. I'll insert in a couple of clips either now, of it before and after blocking because I love those transformation videos on Instagram. I'm addicted to seeing the process of before and after blocking. So here these are now.
Hi everyone, I just finished my Stockholm Slipover. I took it off the needles last night and woven all the ends this morning, and I just wanted to share with you guys what the fit of the slipover is like before blocking, and then I'll include a clip of it being blocked afterwards. So here is the Stockholm Slipover. I'm really liking it. You can see it's not fitted, it's not snug, but it's not quite as oversized or as drapey as I hoped it would be. There's no awkward puckering around the bust or over top of the shoulders, as you can see, which is really nice. But I am hoping that it loosens up a little bit after blocking to give it more of that slouchy, oversized, relaxed fit. So here's the clip of it blocked. Excuse the lighting, the sun is literally setting as I speak. I have now blocked my Stockholm Slipover. I let it soak in water for 25 minutes. I gently pressed all the water out, and then I let it lie flat for 2 days. And after blocking, this is what the sweater looks like. It's much more relaxed. It's much slouchier. You can see it's kind of widened a little bit across the shoulders. It's sort of falling off, and I'm absolutely thrilled.
All right, and now that you've seen those, we are gonna come back into the video here. So I again knit this in the size large. This is knit in one strand of Knitting for Olive Merino in the color Marzipan, and one strand of Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair in the color Oatmeal. They are different colors. I have them here. You can see they are slightly different, but when they are knit together, I really don't think that there's much of a marling effect at all. I think it looks really even, and I'm really, really happy with it. There are two modifications that I made to the sweater that I wanted to mention, and one I've already kind of talked about again in that last video is in regards to the short row shaping on the shoulder. So there's short row shaping here in order to get the shoulder to lift up a little bit rather than sitting flat. And I was just having a really hard time getting the picked up stitches along the cast on edge and then working into the short row shaping to look nice. It was just looking really messy and I wasn't very happy with it. So what I ended up doing instead, I'll hold this up. I have no idea if you're going to be able to tell what I'm talking about or not, is here I ended up just knitting 2 rows of stockinette after picking up from the cast on edge before starting the short row shaping, and that just kind of gave me a little bit of extra space to work with. It allowed my tension to kind of even out a little bit, and I'm much happier with the finished result. Again, you can see it's not perfect, but it's all right. I'm really happy with it. And the other modification I wanted to make is obviously that I did half twisted rib. So along the neckline, the armholes, as well as the bottom, it's all half twisted rib in the exact same way that the collar, cuff, and hem of the sweater I'm wearing are half twisted rib. The final thing I want to note about this sweater, and I'm sure it's an issue with me and not an issue with the pattern, again, the Stockholm sweater by Petite Knit. Petite Knit patterns are great. They're really tried and true. If you're a beginner knitter, she's a fantastic person to follow. She does have a lot of video tutorials on her website. I don't particularly like her video tutorials. I prefer to look up other tutorials on YouTube for the same sort of stitch, but that's fine. That's just a personal preference from me. They're really beautiful patterns. When I was picking up stitches around the armhole and also around the neck hole, I tried to pick up 1 stitch per stitch or row as I went around, and I ended up with way too many stitches. I think that for the neck opening for the large, I was meant to have 184, and when I was finished picking them up, I had 202. So I had 18 extra stitches, which is too many. I needed to fix that. And I understand that because I've done these 2 extra rows in stockinette, I was expecting to have 4 more. So I was expecting to have 88, but 202 was just way too many. So I had to redo that a couple of times in order to get the correct amount. And along the neck opening, I ended up with 178, so 6 less than the pattern recommended after I'd changed the frequency in which I was picking up stitches along this slanted edge here. And I'm happy with it. I don't think that the ribbing is puckering, indicating that I picked up too few stitches. So I'm really happy with kind of the way that the neckline flows. And that is my only finished object. Let's move on to the works in progress. I have 1 work in progress, which I'm excited to share, and that is my Songbird Mittens. So this is my little mitten. This is all I have done here, and I'll go ahead and walk you through this as well. So this is the Songbird Mitten by Erica Hooser, and my knitting this pattern is very heavily inspired by Woozy by Celine, who is another knitting YouTuber who I love very much. Her patterns and the things that she chooses to knit are super inspirational. And I am knitting this with a Long Avec Anna, which is a superwash merino wool in the purple color, which is Amethyst, the gray color, which is Louvre. And you can see I've added in a third color for the cuff of the mitten here, and that is knitted in Knitting for Olive Merino in the color Claret. It's actually left over from a hat that I made my boyfriend, and I'm really happy with how the different colors are looking. I think they look fantastic. However, it's not been a perfect project so far, so I'll share with you the things that I think went really well and the things that are not going so well. First, the original pattern does not call for any of these Latvian braids. I chose to add those myself. Florence Miller has been knitting some colorwork mittens that feature this Latvian braid on both the top and the bottom of the cuff, and I loved them, so I decided to incorporate that into my own pattern. The pattern calls for more 1x1 ribbing along the cuff here. I think that it calls for 6 or 8 rows. I chose to do 4 rands of half-twisted rib before going into the Latvian braid. I then knit the chart for the cuff, just as the pattern recommends, with the only substitution being that I changed the colors, obviously. I have not knit colorwork in a very long time, and I have not worked colorwork ever knitting in the continental style, which is now my preferred method. And when I was knitting this, I messed up the yarn dominance. For people who don't know, when you're knitting colorwork where you have 2 strands, one strand is the dominant color and one is the non-dominant color. So for this here, my dominant color is actually the light gray, and for the rest of the mitten, my dominant color is the purple color. People have a lot of different opinions on yarn dominance. I don't particularly care what yarn is dominant, what color is dominant, what color is not dominant, as long as it's consistent throughout the work. So because this chart is consistently dominant with the light gray and this chart is consistently dominant with the purple, I don't have too much of an issue with that. But just to let you know, if yours ends up looking a little bit different than mine, that could possibly be why. Those are all the changes I've made that have been positive. There are some other things that have happened with this that have been more negative. And that is my tension and my floats. I have never had to pick up or catch a float before, and this pattern, particularly when you're working across the bird, requires that you do it a lot. So I have been catching floats that are more than 5 stitches long in order to hopefully help maintain my tension. The catching of the floats is actually going okay. It's not perfect. You can see it's a little bit wonky. I'm hoping that blocking the mitten is going to fix that. The issue that I've come across is knitting, I'm using the magic loop method. So it's when you go from knitting the one side to the other side, the corners. So it's here. This here is where I've really been having a lot of trouble with my tension. This side is honestly not so bad. It's the thumb edge. It's really messed up. It doesn't look good. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it clearly, but right here, it's just this massive ridge. It's not looking fantastic. The worst of it is when I was doing the increases for the thumb and also messing up my tension right here. That's the worst of it for sure. It's definitely puckered. It feels like this yarn ridge. It's not looking very good. I am telling myself that blocking is somehow gonna fix this. It's so bad that I don't think that blocking will, but I'm telling myself that so that I can continue and not have to go and rip it all out, because I am too far past it now to even consider that. Other than those issues, and I've been resolving them in the last couple of rows, it's getting a lot better. I've been really happy with the pattern and really liked the process. I am finding the color work to be very challenging. Again, a skill I've not used for a while and one that I'm learning in this new style of knitting. So yeah, it's been interesting. I think the more that I go along and the better I get with my tension, the better things will be and the more that I'll enjoy it. yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about these right now. I'm about two-thirds or three-quarters of the way done one mitten, and then I'll have the second mitten to go as well. So these require quite a bit more work on them before I get a finished object. And that is pretty much it for the finished object and the works in progress. When it comes to acquisitions, I technically don't have any. I have ordered the yarn to make my Daydreamer cardigan, which is another object on my Make 9. That's the Daydreamer cardigan by Kudavakika, or Veronica Lindberg, her name versus her username. And I have ordered the yarn for that, but it has not arrived yet. So I won't count that as an acquisition for this video. I'll save that yarn until I share it with you on the next episode. The one thing that I did acquire, if you want to call it that, is that I got myself and my boyfriend tickets to go to the Unravel Festival in Farnham, Surrey in England. So this, I think it's an annual or a biannual yarn festival that Unravel puts on. There is, I believe, over 50 vendors selling various different haberdashery and yarn and knitting accessories, basically all thing, you know, yarn and knitting and crochet. And I'm really excited to get to go to that. I'm hoping to pick up some buttons for that Daydreamer cardigan at the festival, as well as some sock yarn so that I can start working on some socks again. And I'm really excited for that. I haven't decided whether I will be vlogging that experience. That'll kind of depend on how I'm feeling on the day, but at the very least, I'll be sharing with you my experiences going to the Unravel Festival. We are going to be going on Sunday, February 16th, so if anyone else is going to the Unravel Festival and you see this familiar face, feel free to say hi. I would love to meet you. Yeah, and that's all for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you having here on the channel, and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye!